204.
All right, everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us for our fourth session of Next Chapter Career Literacy for Library Staff. Today, we're going to be talking about interview do's and don'ts, and we'll discuss some of the things that can and can't be asked in interviews, as well as ways to prepare. This session is sponsored by MetroNet, the multi-county, multi-type library for the 7 counties in the Twin Cities metro area. Minnesota, I think we have some folks that are from outside of Minnesota today. Minnesota is very unique in having these multi-type libraries. Multi-types serve all types of libraries in the region. And if you are in Minnesota and you don't know your multi-type, you really should. I'm Stephanie Slaughter. I am the programming librarian with MetroNet. My pronouns are she, her. My background is in public libraries, and before MetroNet, I worked for Washington County Library. I am originally from Honolulu, Hawaii, so I got my start in libraries with the Hawaii State Public Library System. But before that, I worked in retail management and for a performing arts theater. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Ann Walker Smalley.
Hello, I'm Ann Walker Smalley, and I'm the director of MetroNet, and I've been the director of MetroNet for, about 20 years. I began my career at a state library in Ohio and then transitioned to government and special libraries in Washington, D.C. So those are interesting opportunities, interesting interview processes, I have to say. And I've done a lot of other things. One of the reasons we wanted to do, I think this would be a good idea, is I did take a break from libraries for about 8 or 9 years, and I did a whole lot of other things during that time. I wrote curriculum, I wrote grants, I organized programs, I did a lot of different things. So when I was transitioning, deciding whether I wanted to go back to being a librarian, this kind of session would have really been helpful to me. So I hope it's helpful to everybody who is attending these sessions. And as we look ahead, and we'll talk about that at the end, to see what other sessions would be helpful to you too. And I get to introduce our Kelsey Baum, who is our MetroNet's HR consultant. Kelsey and I have been working together probably, it's coming up on 2 years here because Kelsey and Renard Consulting worked with us as we developed a new job, including a job description and a job ad to hire the programming librarian. We were evolving our programming and needed a different type of person. So we have worked a lot together, and it's been great because if you're not from Minnesota, you have to realize how small the multi-type staff is. For more than a year, it was only me. And so it was vital that we were able to find a HR consultant to guide us through this process. So it's been great. And they've worked on our other aspects of our HR activities, like our employee handbook and some other things. But I'll let
Everyone's
Kelsey tell
favorite
you
book.
about, hmm?
Said
It's just on,
everyone's favorite book.
yes, well, ours was embarrassingly bad before Renard got a hold of it. But Kelsey can tell you about her background, which is wide and varied.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's nice to meet you if you're here for the first time, and nice to see you again if you're returning. Happy to have you all, whether it's your first time or a return visitor. So, as Anne said, my name is Kelsey. I am an HR and talent leader. I've been doing this for over 10 years, really building out and scaling teams for global brands, startups, consulting firms, a variety of different types of companies of different sizes. That has included creating the HR function from the ground up, growing it, and then managing it with multiple people on staff. Have done things like doubled headcount within a year, supporting a global acquisition. So I've seen a couple things. I've done a couple things, not only here in the US, but ran HR in China and London as well. So I believe these successful business outcomes are a direct result of my very strong curiosity and also very strong care for people and really wanting to build and maintain genuine and trusting relationships. I think that that's where the magic happens. So now I am working as a senior HR consultant with Renard Consulting, partnering to build sustainable, people-focused systems and policies that allow for growth, empower people managers to lead with effective toolkits and coaching, as well as ensure compliance and reduce risk with confidence. Um, and as those of you who've met me already, I think it's really important for us to show up at work and in life in our different dynamic facets. And so not only can I have a corporate headshot and write employee handbooks, you can also find me playing with and petting all of the puppies I can find, particularly in the Mexican jungle, as you see on the left there. A side note, that is one of my good friends has a rescue in Mexico, and she recently has a litter of over 10 puppies. So hoping to visit there soon to be able to update my photo. Excuse me. I've talked to Anne. I really like how librarians are matchmakers for resources, and I view HR similarly. So helping people get what they need, facilitating conversations, really highlighting and shining a light on their strengths to be able to leverage them into their roles. And so I believe that what's good for people is good for business, and really like being able to help be a facilitator of that because jobs change people's lives and how you show up in the world. So enough about me. I want to get to know all of you. So if you will please in the chat write your name, your current role and location, as well as your favorite interview tip or question. Okay. These are some of my favorite parts of the session is the participation, knowing that's actually, I should say, not only one of my favorite parts of the session, but one of my favorite parts about HR is getting to know different people who are really good and talented in ways that I am not. And so these introductions talking about current roles, as well as what people want to learn, or sharing tips and tricks, because we can absolutely all learn from each other are some of my favorite parts. Okay. Yes, Erin. So interviews go both ways. You're interviewing your interviewers for fit too, absolutely. And that's going to show up in this presentation later. Dan, we have Dan's transition. He's spilling the beans. Currently a software engineer, but soon to be a business analyst at the U of M. Question, how does curiosity inform your work? Ooh, good one. Okay, Erin is here again. So happy to have Erin. Oh, I read that one already. Allie, have a couple of things you want to share, no matter what questions are asked. Absolutely, absolutely. Welcome, Sheila. Welcome, Kai. Kristen, happy to have you here. Okay, Mary, so happy to have you here too. Worked in a corporate research library for 26 years. Excellent. Okay, well, people can continue to put things in the chat, but let's keep it moving. I know that we have a lot to cover. So just to give you an overview of the sessions, these sessions are designed to work like a series of a book, where each one can be standalone and hopefully valuable, and provide some learnings and takeaways. But there will be reoccurring themes and then building off of each other and connection between them. So you will hear that and see that even in today's, we'll be referencing some activities that we did in the last sessions that we did. We designed this series to be a springboard for meaningful and helpful conversation rather than a lecture, which is why we asked for introductions. I ask, I beg, I plead all of you to please engage with me throughout. Please feel free to interrupt at any time, to put something in the chat. Again, want it to be connection rather than just a lecture. So if you feel comfortable and willing and able to turn on your camera so I can get some of that visual feedback throughout the session, very much appreciated. Our first session we started off with was cataloging yourself. Steph, if you can go back one slide so I can review those quickly. We did cataloging yourself, discovering your strengths and characteristics for career success on 10:30. On 11:06, we did circulating connections, LinkedIn, and public presence. Last week, our session was entitled Right on Track, Resumes and Cover Letters. So we talked about that. We talked about templates, my love-hate relationship with cover letters and how to leverage those things. And today, of course, as you know, you registered for it and you're attending on the record interview do's and don'ts. Um, so now let's review. I mentioned that there are some activities and the connection between the different ones, but the activity that we did in session one, I think is really important for us to review every single session. So thank you for sticking with me for those of you who've been around. But one of Anne's values is giving credit where credit is due. The activity that we did is based on one that Molly Tregilis put together. She's a former lawyer and executive turned facilitator, coach, and speaker on a mission to fix the corporate world. And we all know that it has some fixing that needs to be done, but that's where this activity came from. So I challenged everyone in session one to please on a sheet of paper, either digital or actual paper, create 4 sections. And in each one, write down seven plus things that are true for them in the skills section, experience, values and priorities, and personal characteristics. So please know that this is something that we did session one. If you haven't done it yet, I highly recommend that you do this exercise. There are tips in the recorded of session one. If you're getting stuck, you're having trouble, but being able to articulate these things and seeing them listed out is really something that we have taken and used in all of our sessions moving forward and are really critical, even today when we think about interviewing and being prepared for that. So want to make sure that for those of us who are not here during that session, that you know what we're talking about when I refer to that. So, um, okay, so right on track, a review of last week's session. Curious to know for those of us that attended, how did last week's session change how you think about your resume or cover letter? Did anyone make any updates? This would be a great time to either jump in either verbally or in the chat.
I think the biggest takeaway for me was how little time HR professionals have to review resumes. So knowing that you have to have all of the most relevant information at the top because they have 6 to 10 seconds or whatever it is to get an impression of your resume before they decide to really delve into it.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I think that that's a really great takeaway because just like a lot of different roles, we're wearing different hats and trying to keep all of the balls in the air at the same time. And so being really intentional on your layout and your content is really going to help you get noticed, particularly when that stack of resumes is really, really large. So thanks for sharing that with sharing that with us, Stephanie. Feel free to add anything else, anyone else, but we're gonna keep it moving. I love a good meme, right? Play and laughter are some of my priorities, some of my values. And so I think that this is really funny because I get it from both sides. You know, the dreaded question, why do you want to work here? Which we're going to talk about later. And the question is because I'm broke and I need to pay rent, right? You can't actually answer the question that way, even though sometimes we wish we could. But I do think it's important to be able to have a little fun with the serious stuff. Interview preparation. So I think that this is actually one of the most important steps of the interview. Um, so I spend a lot of time, even when I'm interviewing myself, for a role, I spend a lot of time prepping and knowing all of the things that I possibly can and what I want to ask and what I want to find out in that interview process. So I think it's really valid to ask the interviewer directly or the person coordinating the interview. Is there anything specifically I can prepare for the interview? I want to make the most of our time together. Those 2 sentences right there can go a really long way. So while not everyone is going to give you a general overview, some might. They might say, here are the things that we're going to cover in the interview. Thanks for asking. That really also helps you prepare and focus on your preparation, where you should focus, what deserves your time, your energy, your effort, etc. And it is becoming increasingly more common for interviewers to give specific questions or prompts or topics ahead of time. So not only does it help you prepare, this is also demonstrating to the interviewer or the person coordinating that you are being thoughtful and you also desire efficiency, right? I've said this in past sessions, and you'll probably hear me say it 47 more times, but you can't hit a moving target, right? So setting expectations, them for you and you for them, as well as every little opportunity to get a little leg up and show that you are thoughtful, and that you want to make the most of their time and yours, can go a long way. So when I'm doing interview preparation, I always look up the company. I look them up on LinkedIn. I look up their website. There are other places you can look them up, like Glassdoor, to see what their employees are saying about them. And I will create a little cheat sheet for myself that I can reference in an interview. But the basics, right? Like, what year was the company founded? How long have they been doing this, right? Like, is this, they've been doing it for a really long time, 100 years? Is it a brand new thing, right? Like, that can affect how the interview goes and what they might be looking for, and how the culture could be at the company. So I always like to know, how long have they been doing this? When was the company founded? How many employees does it have? That also can give you some insight. Is like a small bootstrapped like startup, right? Where everyone is wearing 47 different hats, and I saw some verbal um, agreement, but knowing that can also provide you some insight as well as guiding you and what questions you want to ask them. And I see you came off mute.
Well, I just think because libraries, most of our people here are going to be looking at libraries. And I noticed Mary said she was in a corporate library, so this would apply to her. But what we want to think about, I think, for library jobs is, where does this fit into the overall system? Is it a new job? Is it a replacement? Um, how many people will I be working with? And those sorts of interview questions you have. I will say, as far as interview preparation, Bill Asp, some of you Minnesota librarians may know who he was. He was state librarian at one point. But when I was transitioning back into the library, he said, if you're going to go work in a library, work in a branch or be a library director or whatever, just go incognito and sit in the space. And that will tell you what kind of place it is and whether you really want to work there. I always thought that was a great preparation tip. So you
Mhm.
just sit there in the reference room or whatever and see how people deal with, see how the employees deal with the random people that come into every library.
It's a great tip. Um, So beyond that, you can also, when you're looking things up online, what is their vision, their mission, their values? Like, what do they care about? Does that align with what you've identified yours to be from that activity one? And then a big one, right? Have there been any big changes or events there lately? Have there been any big investments? Have there been new initiatives? Have there been layoffs, right? Have there been lawsuits? Those are all things that help you inform what it's like to work there and how you can be prepared for that interview. I also really encourage people to look up your interviewer. Who are you meeting with? LinkedIn is a great place to be able to do that, as well as the About Us page if they have it on a website. But what has their career trajectory been, their education? Do you have any overlap there? Have they made career transitions, right? Have you made a career transition, or are you looking to make one? Those also create opportunities for questions and connection when you're preparing for an interview. How long have they been with the company? Have they changed roles within that same company? Again, helps inform you, are people moving around? Are there different opportunities? Are people being promoted? Again, that goes back to how many employees does it have? If they only have 3 employees and someone hasn't changed roles, well, that makes a lot more sense, right? Than if a library has 100 employees and someone's been there for 10 years without making any changes. So all of these things really help inform you going into the interview about the role, and how you might fit in there. Um, I think it's important. It can be important, and not everyone's willing to do it. But if they're not hiring now, ask for an informational interview. So reach out to recruiters, reach out to HR, even someone who is a manager of a department, to ask if they're willing to have an informal chat about working at the company because you're really interested and you'd like to be prepared. And so knowing what you would have to do to be qualified when that time comes and something opens up, Just learning more, again, can really provide insight into working there if and when the time comes, as well as indicating your interest, or telling you things about the role that maybe you don't want to be doing. And so it's, again, it's called an informational interview for a reason, and can be a really powerful tool to use if people are willing and able to share that time with them. And not only that, but if and when something does open up, they are more likely to reach out to you if you've had, because they already have you fresh in your mind. They already know that you're interested. Okay, so tell me about yourself. Sounds like the easiest question there is and can be one of the most difficult ones, right? Because who knows you better than yourself, right? But when you're put on the spot and asked to tell someone about it, I don't know about you, but I've definitely like clammed up trying to think about that. And so this is a place where that activity from session one comes into. And so a good tell me about yourself should hit all four of those columns. It should address skills, experience, values and priorities, and your personal characteristics. You can also draw from your LinkedIn About Me section that we talked about in session two, or from your professional profile from your resume that we talked about last session. So the tell me about yourself question it's different than a walk me through your resume, two different questions, two different answers. The tell me about yourself question, again, encompassing all of those things about you personally and professionally, is short and it's sweet. It's ideally 1 minute long, 2 minutes tops. And I would encourage everyone really to practice this out loud, and have with someone who knows you well and have them give you feedback. Are you capturing your worth? Are you capturing your uniqueness? What are you not mentioning that you think is really, do they think is really critical to who you are and how you show up, and making sure that you're being open about that, and you're also highlighting those things about you. I think is a really great way to add to that and feel confident in introducing yourself. Because again, that one question feels silly, but can be really important and impactful, and starting the interview off on the right foot. Again, so tell me about yourself is different than walk me through your resume. So you definitely want to prepare a walk me through your resume, and we'll talk about that more in a future slide. But that should be probably 3 to 5 minutes, right? It should hit all of your main accomplishments as well as the responsibilities that you held in each role. This will demonstrate your ability to articulate detail concisely in a meaningful as well as engaging way. Verbally talking through your experience is also a great way or a great time to address a gap in any resume that you have. Like if you took a couple years off to help a family member to backpack through Asia, to learn the guitar and play in a band. Whatever it was, this walk me, talk me through your resume is a great time to address that gap so that the interviewer understands what you were doing at that time. Anne has some really good examples of that. She talked about it in the very beginning, where she took off a couple years to do different things and raise her family. And so in an interview, this is a great time to address that. Um, so those it can be stories, right? Like Stephanie did this for us when she was interviewing with us. It was a great opportunity, and she took it to talk about a story that was both personal and engaging, and prepared her for a library job. And then last but not least, this is also a time and a good place where you could include something that maybe didn't make the resume, didn't feel like something that could or should go on a line, because you wanted to make sure that you were highlighting other things, but something that was important to the success of the library or an organization. So the walk me, talk me through your resume is a great place to, again, clear up anything that might not be clear just from reading it, about you or what you've done. Okay. So LinkedIn, we talked all about LinkedIn in session two, but now that you have the tips and the tricks and the tools to optimize your profile, you know how to use it. Make sure that you're leveraging this tool. Leverage your profile, leverage your connections. Um, People ask me quite often, directly, is it appropriate to connect with an interviewer or hiring manager on LinkedIn? Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. And not only is it appropriate, I think it's good, right? Again, showing engagement, showing initiative, showing connection, and as we've talked about in previous sessions, that networking is really important and gets you so far. Um, and then should you be connecting with your interviewer or hiring manager before or after you've interviewed? And honestly, either one is fine. It really is. So before you interviewed, you can send a little note with a connection request saying, "I'm really looking forward to our interview coming up on this day, blah, blah, blah." Um, or after you've interviewed it, you can follow up with a thank you note, which we're going to get into in a minute. So those are little things that can help make it feel a little bit easier to connect with them if you're feeling wary or feeling nervous about connecting with them, but you shouldn't. That's the whole point of LinkedIn is to make sure that you are networking and you're connecting with people who have similar interests, who can really help you and you them grow in your careers. Another thing that LinkedIn is really great for is when you're interviewing is looking up that person who you're going to be interviewing with and seeing if you have any mutual connections. I love to see that. LinkedIn will show you if you have any second degree connections, third degree connections, how connected they are to you. And so if you see that you have some mutual connections and you feel comfortable and have a good relationship with the people that you do have mutual connections with, reach out to them, right? Reach out to them and ask them, what do you know about this company? Give me the inside scoop. Why are they hiring? What do you know about the job? What do you know about working with Anne over at Metronet? What's that like? Um, this is also a really good opportunity for them to be able to make an introduction. A warm introduction can really give you a leg up in the interview process, particularly if there are a lot of applicants or candidates for a role, because someone is much more likely to pay attention and review your resume if someone that they know and have worked with is willing to vouch for them, right? It's like a pre-reference. Um, and so, Anne, I saw you say something again, but you're on mute.
Mostly I'm talking to myself, but pre-reference, I like that.
Yeah, it's a pre-reference. It's a warm intro. And and honestly really increases your chances of you getting an interview if there is that personal connection with people who can already vouch for you. So definitely, if you are using LinkedIn, use it to look people up and leverage that tool, leverage your connections, leverage your network. And then, of course, as always, do the same thing for others. If someone reaches out to you and they say, "Hey, I'm looking to interview at Metronet and I see that you're working there. What can you tell me about the role?" Or that you worked at Washington County Library or somewhere else because I should stop using Stephanie as an example all of the time. Um, we have another slide about it. I feel like I keep saying that, but reciprocate, reciprocate, reciprocate. Um, your network is your net worth. So thank you notes. They're nice, they feel good for both sides, and they also give you a good reason to connect and follow up via LinkedIn. Um, Doing this can also help the interviewer think about you, continue to think about you, and keep you fresh in their mind. So always customize these. A thank you for your time email, frankly, is pretty boring and doesn't really help you in a meaningful way. So I highly recommend you include an interesting takeaway or appreciate a moment of connection you had or alignment to the role or something that you had in common, right? Something that you really took away and like left and made an impact on you that you're taking away from that interview. And so reference that in the thank you note. Because that again is going to go a lot further than a thank you for your time. I'm really interested in this role. I really liked your red shirt, you know, make
Don't
things,
say that.
no, that's what I'm saying is like, make it count. Send a meaningful, customized thank you note. It doesn't have to be super long. It can, again, just be referencing a moment of connection or something that you really aligned on, something that you took away from the interview, something that you learned, right? But that's going to go a lot further than thank you for your time. I want to reiterate my interest in the librarian role.
It's also a good chance if something didn't go quite the way you wanted it to go, or you rethought your answer or whatever, it's a way to mention that in the thank you. Oh, I just wanted to explain this particular, whatever, without a big deal, It does make a difference, I think, to an interviewer if they're, maybe they were wondering about that too. But it is an opportunity to provide additional information as well as, I like your red shirt.
Yeah, yes, it is. And ask questions. You can use it as like Anne says, as a follow-up to say, I've really been thinking about what we talked about in the interview, and this is something that came to mind that I wanted to share with you. Or here's a follow-up question I had after I spent some time talking about or thinking about what we talked about in our interview. Again, those things can really go a long way. So thank you notes, they can be done and they can be sent via LinkedIn, of course, again, giving you an extra little good reason to connect with them on LinkedIn. But they can also be sent by email if you prefer. Or extra big bonus points if you send snail mail. I have always loved getting a handwritten thank you note. It shows that extra little bit of step and personalization, which I love, and want to be very clear that that is not at all expected or necessary. But if you really want to stand out, that's definitely possible. Whatever form you do choose to send your thank you note in, ideally that should be sent within 3 days, 3 business days following the interview. So long enough to have had to reflect and send a meaningful note, and also not so long that they or you forget about what you talked about. Make sense? Okay. Common interview questions. It was really hard to narrow down questions for this page because there are so many that we could cover. I'm only going to talk through 3 today for the sake of time, but if there's anything else anyone really wants to cover today, put it in the chat or come off mute and share it with us, and I'm really happy to talk through that as well. So one question that you'll get, I can almost guarantee in almost every single interview is, what do you know about XYZ company? Or what do you know about XYZ library? And why are you interested in working here? And as we joked about in a couple slides ago, because I need money and bad jokes don't pay my mortgage. Having a good and well thought out answer for this really again sets the tone for a good interview. So they're asking you this question to understand how much you've researched the company, which we talked about a couple slides ago, so important, which is a reflection of the candidate's genuine interest in the role and not just needing to apply to as many jobs as they possibly can because they need a job and they don't really care what it is. So that's really going to indicate your interest as well as how engaged you are, how thoughtful you are about why you want to work there. Um, so one that you should definitely have a good answer to that you can refer to again, activity from session one, talking about how it aligns with your values, how the role requirements and the responsibilities really line up with where you've been able to do well in previous roles, and you want to um, work somewhere where you have the opportunity to contribute, as well as to learn new things, are all very valid answers. This one we also referenced. Walk me through your experience and resume. We don't need to go line by line, but please highlight the experiences that prepare you for this role. Um, this one I ask in the first interview forever and always. I am not just evaluating fit, I'm also evaluating communication, I'm evaluating storytelling skills. Is the candidate able to connect the dots between what either the job ad says or my introduction of the role says that we need in the role and what they have done and what they care about? Um, like it says here, are you able to call attention to the experience that would be most relevant to the position that you're interviewing for? So that is again one that should be 3 to 5 minutes max, and you should have prepared for the first interview forever and always, and likely throughout the interview process because there are different types of interviews. Usually it's a series. It's not just one. It's not just one in job offer, but the interview process usually adds in additional people, and so having that prepared and being able to articulate it not just in the first interview, but in the subsequent is really important. I also really like describe your ideal relationship with your manager. So, to the answer to this question provides insight into your relationship and communication skills. It also is going to tell me how you work with the team and if what your needed style, whether you are heads down, completely quiet environment, or you need um, more socialization, you need more brainstorm time, you're really a big team player collaborator, you're much better when you're working independently. Will that style that you need to do your best work align with what the company needs for the role, but will it align with the company's management philosophy and culture, as well as some specific managers? I also asked that question, particularly the point about specific managers, is because that alignment, that fit can be so important. And so as part of the preparation process on the other side, preparing for an interview, I know what does and doesn't work for specific managers. And so being able to ask that question openly and transparently and talking about those different quirks because everyone has their own quirks and styles and ways to be successful. Being able to identify that in your past and also what you're looking for moving forward is going to help me understand if you're going to be a good fit for that specific manager and that team beyond just the role. Before we move on to what they can't ask, is there any other common interview questions that people want to talk about? Anything that they struggle with, anything they really love, anything they really hate. Strengths and weaknesses. Yes, Erin. Okay, so you probably know that this is coming from activity one, right? You're going to be able to articulate your value. What are your strengths? What are you particularly good at? Weaknesses. This is always uh, uh, an interesting one to address. I don't think that it should be answered with um, uh, trying to, like, this shouldn't be a spin, right? It shouldn't be a like, I'm a perfectionist, but what that means is that I pay great attention to detail so you don't want to take a weakness and spin it into a positive because that's not really getting to the heart of the question, which is, are you self-aware? Can you identify, um, where you shine and where you don't, and how does that bode for the role, right? And so weaknesses, rather than answer with something that you're not great at, um, or you feel like is a something that could count against you, I like to answer that question with something that I've been working on is. And so yes, you're addressing that there has been opportunity for improvement in some of your skill sets or experience, but then talk about how you're actively working to improve it. And so you're answering the question in the spirit that it's asked is you're not trying to turn a negative into a positive, but you're being genuine about not being perfect, which no one is, and actively working on it. And so that's how I would answer that question about weaknesses. Is that helpful? Does that make sense to everyone? Okay.
And that's
Uh,
part of the preparation, so they're going to ask some version of this question. And
mhm.
so, you can identify one or two weaknesses and then choose the one to talk about based on what they've already asked you to this point. So you can see, I once had a reference say to a prospective employer about me, she doesn't suffer fools gladly. I thought, well, thanks a lot. But they asked me about that in the interview. And so I was semi-prepared, but not completely prepared. And honestly, that's really not a good characteristic to be a reference librarian, as we all know. So we'll talk about preparing your references later.
Yeah. Sheila, you have a question or a good example of specific examples. How did you handle XYZ situation, especially on the fly? Um, that part of that is where preparation comes in, particularly asking the interviewer, what should I be prepared for, right? Um, so do your research, be prepared, but beyond that, you're not required to answer on the fly. It's perfectly acceptable to say, that's a really good question, and I want to make sure that I'm answering it thoughtfully and authentically in the way that you're asking it. And so I'd like to either come back to that question or, can I have a couple of seconds to think about it? So ideally, an interview should not be how well you can answer questions on the fly, but how thoroughly you can answer them in relation to your skill set, your experience, and how you would actually do the job. And so I hope that interviewers will give you that opportunity, but I hope that everyone will feel empowered to ask for that as well, to ask for either, let me think about that for a minute, let us come back to that. Um, those are perfectly reasonable ways to handle those questions. Is that helpful at all, Sheila? Has anyone here ever done that? Asked for like little timeout in an interview? Okay. I personally, if someone does that, I like it. Because again, I like to see that someone is engaged. They are more interested in providing a thoughtful, real answer rather than a quick one. And so I don't think that that is a sign of weakness. I think that asking for what you need and what you want so that you can be thoughtful and intentional is a sign of strength.
How do you feel about taking notes during the interview?
I think totally fine. I take notes during an interview, and like we're going to talk about later, and like I believe said earlier, it's a two-way street, and so just be like I'm taking interview notes, and so the candidate should be able to take them as well. I think it can also um, show engagement and intention. And the bonus about taking notes during an interview is that the things that are particularly impactful that you're taking notes about, you'll be able to use later when you go to follow up with your thank you note. Again, to customize it and so that it's a takeaway, something that really struck you, something that was impactful, something that you kept thinking about, right? Rather than a thank you for your time. I'm interested in the job and I like your red shirt. So feel free to take notes. Um, One thing that I do if I'm doing it, if it is a phone call, I always clarify to the person on the other end. You'll probably hear some typing on my computer. Please know that I'm taking notes because I want to make sure that I'm remembering our conversation today together accurately. I'm not chatting with my friends or sending other emails. So I do let them know exactly what I'm doing if they can't see that that's what I'm doing. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to talk about today or specific examples? No? Okay. You can always come back to it. I told you all that I'm happy to be interrupted and I want this to be helpful and engaging. And so if you think of something, bring it up. And we can always work backwards. So what can't they ask, right? What is an illegal or discriminatory interview questions and how do you respond to those? So I, in general, would avoid asking if you are the interviewer or the interviewee, as well as answering questions related to protected characteristics. So protected characteristics are things like race, ethnicity, national origin, or religion. So questions like, oh, I noticed you have an accent. Where are you from? Where were you born? That's a no-no question. Don't ask those things. Questions about age, right? So how old are you? When were you born? Um, those are also should not be talked about in an interview. Marital status or family, like, are you married? Do you have children? Not appropriate. Pregnancy or plans to start a family, also not appropriate. Sexual orientation, don't ask about that. Disabilities or health status, right? And so disabilities, I want to be clear that that is not just physical health, but also mental health as well, is a protected characteristic. So that's something to note, as well as immigration or citizenship status. Can't ask about those things. Um, there are always some gray area questions, right? And so one might be, oh, I see that like on your resume, you went to Tulane University. I went there too. What year did you graduate? Um, when something like this happens, the interviewer is likely trying to connect with you, which is a good sign, but also not a great question that they should be asking, or you should be asking if you are the interviewer, because that, while it not necessarily, can also be an indicator of age. Does that make sense? So getting down to the long and the short of it, all questions need to be associated and relevant to the specific job and the corresponding responsibility. I'm going to try English one more time. Corresponding responsibilities. Thank you. Those are the only things that can and should be asked. And so you might be thinking, okay, I've had questions like this before, or I've heard of them, or if this happens, what do I do? So there are a couple different options for answering what are inappropriate or potentially illegal interview questions. And so the first one is, depending on the severity of the question, is to answer it if you feel comfortable. If you think the interviewer was simply trying to get to know you, the question was innocent, it was naive, you can choose to answer again if you want to. But I do recommend that you consider the intent of the question. So kind of going back to that Tulane University, were they asking that question to know, did you guys both go to the boot for happy hour? Did you study on the same quad and you want to talk about the tree with all of the Mardi Gras beads, right? Are they looking for connection, or are they trying to know about your age? So if you're comfortable answering, you can do that, but you don't have to. You can also sidestep or redirect the question. So um, this is a way to discreetly refuse to answer the question, but address the concerns that they raise. So, for example, if someone asks you whether or not you have children, whether or not you're married, they might really be wanting to know whether your family responsibilities will interfere with the frequent travel that is required by the job. So you could answer the question with something like, I can assure you that my personal life will not interfere with my professional responsibilities. That is a perfectly acceptable way to answer what they're really trying to get at without giving away any personal information that frankly isn't relevant to your ability to do the job. And then the last way, or one of the last ways, the last one we'll talk about today, is to question the relevance of the question. If it feels really inappropriate, you can ask them how that relates to the position you're interviewing for, which can hopefully, if they can read the room, alert them that they're answering something that isn't relevant to the question or to the role that you're interviewing for. And of course, in refusing to answer the question, you can always directly refuse to answer the question, and either try changing the subject or choose to end the interview early if you don't think that how it's going and what was asked is going to lead to a good rest of the interview. How does everyone think, feel about that? Has anyone ever asked you anything that you're like, I'm not sure if you should be asking me that?
I've been asked those kind of questions, and that's exactly my response, which is, I don't think you're supposed to ask me that. You know, I I tend to be very straightforward, and it's like, really, you don't want to say it's none of your business, but it really is none of their business what your childcare arrangements are or how much longer you plan to work or whatever. I do think, though, when we're in the modern era we're in now with immigration and citizenship status, we're seeing a lot of job ads that say you must be, um, what's the right word? Eligible to work in the US. We're not going to pay for your visa or do that. So one would hope that you wouldn't get to an interview if you were ineligible to work to have them ask that question
Well, and
because
they
that's
can
legit. I mean, it's legit to put that on a job ad.
and they can ask as part of the interview, do you meet the required
Right.
qualifications or are you legally authorized to work in the United States of America? Yes, they can ask that because that is one of
And it was
the
clear.
requirements for the job is
Right.
you have to be legally eligible and be able to prove that technically within 3 days of hire, but uh, that is part of it and it's relevant.
It
So
is.
questions like that they can ask, but again, it's always getting back to how is it relevant to the specific job and the requirements and the responsibilities. Um, so going back to the question about, family and travel, the interviewer can, rather than say, are you married? Are you planning to start a family? Are you pregnant? They can't ask those questions, but they can and they should say, this position requires frequent travel. There are some potential um, evening hours that are evening or weekend hours to attend job fairs or book fairs or whatever it is, right? And so this is what the job requires. This is part of it. Are you able to fulfill those requirements? And so again, it's getting back to what the job needs rather than focusing on the personal situation of the employee, which is not relevant if they can meet um, the requirements of the role.
I think
Okay.
that's true too for disabilities and health status. We see a lot of job ads. We looked at that one from Duluth, um, where it is, must be able to push a book truck with 50 pounds of books or whatever it said. And that's the same kind of question. And when we aren't going to talk about this, but perhaps at a future session when we talk about negotiating the job offer, that's where you can talk about any accommodations that you might need to fulfill the role of this job. You don't want to do that now, right? You want to say, I can't push 50 pounds every day, but I can 3 days a week. Do you understand my question?
No, can you can you ask it
No.
again? I'm
Well,
sorry, you caught me reading Melissa's question
oh,
in the
sorry.
chat. Um,
Yes, it
so
does tell you things if they're asking you those questions.
so we'll get to Melissa's question in 1 minute, but can you
Well, I'm
ask
just
me the
saying,
question?
the things they're not allowed to ask, do you have a disability? I have seen people ask that question based on who knows what, um, and it's the same kind of question they need to ask. Can you push a book truck with 50 pounds of books on it,
With or without like with
with
or
or
without
without
a accommodation?
accommodations?
Yeah.
So that's a legit question. And if you do need an accommodation of some sort, whatever, you don't have that conversation here. You have that later. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
If you
Thank
are
you.
needing specific accommodations, talk about them later. But if the question is, can you perform this task with or without accommodations? Answer truthfully. Can you do it? You might require accommodations, but could you do it with accommodations? Yes, you could. Um, okay. So Melissa asks, does it tell you anything about the organization or the interviewers if they are asking these questions? Seems like they are flaunting the laws or uninformed or untrained. I would like to think, Melissa, that a lot of times it is due to lack of training or information rather than um, like outright, like you say, flaunting the laws or wanting to get away with things. Um, and I think some of that, a lot, not all some of that, a lot of that is going to be case by case. When you're in there, you're hearing the conversation, context matters, right? And so, in that first example of how to answer it, if they're just excited, they're trying to connect with you, you can answer it if you want to. Um, a lot of times, I think that that's where these things come from, is they are trying to find connection or they're uninformed. I think that those are a lot more common than downright bad intent. Um, but that does also give you information if they're asking you questions that they're uninformed, they're not trained about how to do a proper interview, what their inside organization might look like, and if they are uninformed or not trained or not organized in the interview process, that you might have the same experience when you're working there as well. That um, connection with your manager or performance reviews or feedback, like all of those things you might not get the experience that you are looking for, especially if it's organized. Does that make sense? So long and short of it is, hopefully they're just uninformed or untrained. Not that they want to be bad, but it's something to really keep in mind as you're considering, is some of that more informal things in the workplace. Are you okay with that? Does it work? Does it not? Okay. Allie asks, I know you talked about informational interviews, but I would also like to mention that if you get the call that you were not selected for a position, it's great to ask the interviewer if the interview would be willing to talk with you about their reflections on your interview. I always offer that and say, not right now, but please be in touch. If that's of interest, I'm willing to provide feedback. I totally agree. And I'm going to say that in a future slide is asking for feedback is great. Um, Acting on feedback is even better. However, not everyone will always give you feedback. And so it's important to know that, again, depending on training, depending on company policies, that they may or may not be willing or able or have the time to give you specific feedback about your interview. But it never hurts to ask. And closed mouths don't get fed, right? So ask the question. Okay. Anything else? Um, oh, Allie. Oh, sorry. I thought we only had an hour. Nope, we have an hour and a half. But again, really good point, and I'm glad that you're bringing it up. And that's what these sessions are supposed to do is create dialogue, talk about things. And they don't always have to go in the order that we had planned. It's actually kind of more fun, right? To be a little spontaneous. So, any other questions about what they can ask, what they can't? No? Okay.
Just a note that we do plan to have a future session on employment law where we will have Kelsey and we also have our employment attorney and we have a plan for that. So we can go deeper into some of those.
Okay. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but reciprocate. It takes two to tango, right? And just like Aaron said at the very beginning, an interview is a two-way street, and it should really be a candid, transparent conversation between two parties with the goal to understand the role, the team, the company, and the candidate if they're a good mutual fit. Because I say this to people all the time, both job seekers as well as hiring companies, that if it's not a good fit for one side, it's not a good fit for either, right? Um, and so, in order to be able to get to that right fit, that requires both sides to be as appropriately and professionally transparent as possible. And so that, again, getting back to the first activity that we did, knowing where you're good, what you want, what you value, and being able to talk about and articulate those things, and the company being able to do the same thing, right? So that you both can get as much information out of that as possible to understand if that fit is mutual or if it's not. And it's really hard to know if that's there, if the fit is there, if both parties aren't being open and transparent about the good and the bad and the challenges and the quirks. Um, and so, again, just to reiterate, and to Erin's point, you are evaluating them just as much as they are evaluating you. Um, with that said, always come prepared with questions to ask the interviewer. And ask your questions based on what are important to you in a role. Reference your values, your priorities from that activity, maybe what you've experienced in past roles. Like think about what you've experienced in past roles that you definitely don't want to do again, and come up with questions from there. Um, so some questions that I personally like and I use when I'm exploring an opportunity, my number one that I like is what changes has the organization made based on direct feedback from employees. It is important to me working for anyone, or now in consulting, choosing to work with an organization. Are you listening to your employees? Do you value what they're telling you? And not only that, it is one thing to listen and it is another thing to act. And so this is a question that I ask in every single interview at the appropriate time, probably not on the first interview, but sometimes I do, because why not? But I want to know, being an employer caring about the people that they have and their feedback, what they're experiencing day to day, and wanting to make it the best place that they can to work for them, within reason, is really important to me. And so I always ask that question. Can you please describe what the first 30, 60, 90 days at XYZ company would entail? I think this is really good and telling to think about, like, are they prepared for this person, for you to start in the role, right? This is helping set expectations. And again, you can't hit a moving or invisible target. And so laying out a 30, 60, 90 and asking that for them to do for you is going to help you know what you need to do to be successful, and also what you can expect and where you should be focusing your time. What is that on specific tasks? Is it taking over one task from another person because they're overwhelmed and burnt out? Should your first 30 days be spent on getting to know the company? Should the first 60 days, should you know everyone's name by the end of that? Like, what are those expectations and how are they preparing to set you up for success in the role is another question that I found to be really valuable. Um, what does success look like for this position? Success means different things to different people. And so asking directly what that looks like, not only from the perspective of the manager of this role, but sometimes that answer, what is successful, to the board or to company leadership is different. And so understanding what success looks like from the different perspectives is also really informative to you, to know, again, what the company values, what they're shooting for, what are the goals, and how could you potentially fit into those. What kind of support would I receive in this role to achieve it, to achieve that success, right? So this is piggybacking on that other question. Um, if the position is doing more than one job, right? There's portions from what normally would be a librarian plus a barista plus an admin assistant, right? Like, who's helping me prioritize what gets done first? And so if you're seeing one of those jobs that is kind of a hybrid role, there's different responsibilities from seemingly different or conflicting departments, understand, how am I going to be set up for success and who's going to help me get there? Um, I also really like what skill sets and characteristics work well on the team, which do not. Again, that's helping you understand who does well, who doesn't. Do I have those characteristics and skill sets that they're looking for? And then, maybe in follow-up interviews, since you know what they're looking for and what works and what doesn't, you can hone in on and use that information, to really highlight that you have those things, to help you get the job. So I like to know what works well. This one too, a lot of people like to talk about themselves, right? And so, again, going back to preparing for an interview, do your research on the person that you're going to be interviewing with. Um, have a general understanding of what their career might have been like. And so, I usually ask a question like, because assuming that they're in a position that is higher up than you or whatever, like, given that you've been where I'm going, what advice would you give me if you were just starting out, right? Or either in the profession or in the company and you're wanting to make an impact. Like you get to do it again, knowing what you've known, knowing what you know, you've been here before. And people respond really well to that question because they get to give advice, they get to talk about themselves, and they're also, again, giving you a direct, here's what you should be thinking about, here's what you should be doing if you want to get to where I've been. So not only is it informative, but it is also can be flattering. So I love a good 2 for 1. Does anyone else have any questions that they like to ask interviewers during interviews? I would love to learn from your brilliant minds. Yes, no, maybe so. Just make sure you go into interviews with some questions because there is nothing worse than being the interviewer and you ask, do you have any questions for me? And they say, no. What do you mean, no? Usually I have probably way too many questions, which again I told you I was curious. I like to know how things work. And so I usually have too many questions rather than not enough. But um, they show you're engaged, they're showing that you're thinking about it. And so make sure that you go into it with several questions because it is very common that in the course of them explaining the role, the company, et cetera, that they might answer some of the questions that you had prepared for them. And so make sure that you have several so that you're not left looking like you didn't prepare for the interview. Okay. So use lots of clarification about the job listing. Yes. I like that. Can you help me understand what that looks like? You're saying that you're looking for like this role, but what does that, or you're looking for this, there's this responsibility. What does that look like? How does that get achieved? Who's involved, etc. What does a day look like? Yeah, what does a typical day look like? How did this position become available? Is this a new or previous existing position? Absolutely, Bill. When I ask fairly often, that is also something that you can oftentimes figure out if you do a little bit of LinkedIn sleuthing ahead of time. But it's still good to know and good to ask to see if what it looks like to you in your research is also how they answer. So definitely good for them to provide context. Aaron, how many questions are too many questions? I always have a ton. Yeah, me too, Aaron. I'm with you. I think knowing what are the most important to you. And so having a priority list. And then again, also gauging, reading the room. How is the interviewer? Are they moving things like very much along on the time frame that they said they would? Are they kind of willing and able to go a little bit longer? Um, it's hard for me to answer this with a definite, three is not enough and five's too many. But just have a list of them that you care about, know which ones you want to know about the most, ask those, and then read the room, see how the interview is going, see how the flow is going, and um, if it seems like they might want to be ending the interview or you're wrapping up, you can say, I see that we're wrapping up and I just have one more question that I've prepared that's important to me if you have time for it. So you're not expecting that they're going to answer it for you. You're asking them, you're giving them the option to say, nope, gotta go. I have another appointment. But they'll usually say, okay, yep, like I have time for one more. So that helps you also know that you can get in the last one that you have that is the most important to you. Okay, Kai says, my manager gave me this one. What are some challenges facing this organization and how do you plan to handle them? People like answering that. Yes, I agree. what are the challenges that are facing the organization, as well as you can also ask, what do you think would be the biggest challenge for me coming into this role? Again, that helps you inform what's going on behind the scenes, as well as preps you to be able to, in future interviews, if you get there, know what you should be speaking to, and so that you can prepare for it. But yeah, I like that challenge question. Okay, so um, references. We're gonna, for the sake of time, we have 15 minutes left, so I'm gonna try to go through this a little bit quicker to make sure that we hit everything. But we've talked about tooting your own horn accurately, right, on your LinkedIn, on your resume. Now let someone else sing your praises. Um, Not only is good performance necessary to moving on to a new role, but maintaining positive professional relationships is essential to get those stellar references that's going to really push you across that finish line from interview to getting an offer. And so we're going to talk about who to ask and how to help them prepare. But before we talk about who to ask, make sure you ask them ahead of time, right? Don't give out people's contact information and so they get a surprise call saying, "Hey, Susie Q gave me your personal cell phone number and she worked with you 3 years ago. And can you tell me about this role that you don't even know that she's applying to?" That's not setting you up for success. So make sure that you talk to who you're asking for a reference for in advance to make sure that they're on board. So ask former managers or project supervisors, someone who can provide clear insight into your role, your results, um, your teamwork or your independence, your coachability. Someone who has that perspective is really important. So I would definitely prioritize having mostly former managers or project supervisors, but close team members, colleagues, clients, people who worked with you very often and really directly. I think those are also valid because they can provide a different perspective rather than someone overseeing your work to someone who's working directly with you, which is also important. Um, they can provide feedback on your work ethic, right? If it's a group project, we all know how group projects can be. Are you the person carrying the team? Are you the person who's absent until presentation day? How do you work as part of the team? What does that work ethic look like? How do you communicate with your colleagues or with your clients? And how are you partnering with them? If you don't have a ton of previous experience, if you're newer to working, or if you didn't have a great relationship with your previous managers, you can also always ask professors, teachers, or academic advisors. And they can speak to something different. They can speak to your potential, they can speak to your engagement, your related coursework, and how that prepared you for the role. So those are also valid reference people for references. And then preparation is key for everything, right? But for interviews, and so make sure that you're getting the most out of your reference for you and for them. And so how you can help them prepare is make sure you have their contact information correct. And then ask them, do you have a preferred method? Do you prefer to be contacted via email, via phone, via text? What time of day, right? So that they're more willing to be your reference, right? And then this is also really important. Send them your updated resume because things probably changed since you worked with them last, a description of the job description of the role that you're interviewing for. And the most important thing, be really clear about what you want them to highlight about you. If you say, Anne, I know that you can speak to my interview skills and my recruiting skills and my handbook writing, my ability to navigate difficult conversations with humanity and grace. Say that to the person, because that's going to get you further and it's going to make it easier on them. And when you make it easier on them, they're much more willing to help you out. Make sense?
I think it's a good idea to prepare them. When I was transitioning from something back into libraries, these people that I had been working for knew nothing about libraries. And so if they were going to get a call from somebody working in a library and asking how would she fit into, so I told them exactly these things. This is the job. This is what I do for you. This is how it translates. Please tell them this. And everybody was happy. me and my references were happy because they didn't like, nobody wants to be surprised or unprepared for the question.
Yeah, it definitely makes the most of the opportunity, um, and helps you get the job. So prepare them. It's good for them. It's good for you. It's also good for the person asking for and doing the reference for the company because it makes the process smoother. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about interview types. There are these days phone interviews and video interviews and asynchronous interviews, and what are they and why are they different and why do we have multiple steps and different multiple types? So phone interviews are often the first step in an interview process, and they're designed primarily to be an initial and brief introduction to make sure that the candidate has the basic qualifications and they're actually interested. Again, so they're going to ask you, why do you want to work here? Right? What is interesting to you about the role? Um, and then once you've essentially passed that very first basic qualifications and vibe check, it usually goes on to a video or an in-person interview. And those are held to get a more detailed assessment of a candidate's communication skills, personality, professionalism, and how they would be able to fulfill the current need of the open role, how they would work with the team. So the phone screen is again just quick brief. Can you do the job? Are you qualified? Are you are you decent to talk to? Can I see you getting along on the team? Should I move you on to where we're really going to dig into this? Okay. Jeanette, is it ever okay to ask for an in-person interview instead of a video interview? I think you can ask for almost whatever you want as long as you do it with tact, right? So, yes, some reasons that people will do a video interview instead of an in-person can be due to they allow for easier schedule flexibility, visual, like having that visual connection across geography, right? If you are in two different locations, that's why I use them often. It can also really save time not having to drive to the place and asking to take time off of work with your current job, all of those things. So there are a lot of benefits to a video interview, but some of those things can't be replaced with that in-person connection. And so I think it's absolutely okay for you to ask and say, I see that you're requesting a video interview. It actually works for my schedule, and ideally, I'd prefer that face-to-face connection, and I'm happy to drive to the office if you're willing and open to that. But also, if that doesn't work, I totally understand and am happy to make the video interview work. But can you ask for it? Yeah, you can ask for what you want, girl. Okay. Pay attention to time zones, particularly if it's a video interview. When you're scheduling and when you're looking at your calendar, making sure that you're on the same time zone. There's nothing worse than being on either end of it and someone saying, "Hey, I'm waiting for you in the Zoom room. Where are you at?" And you're like, "Oh shoot, I'm in my pajamas and not ready to be interviewing you." And equipment functionality, right? So test out your mic, test out your video before you're going to get on a virtual call. Attire, dress appropriately for the job you're applying for. This does not mean you have to wear a suit to every interview. That's not necessary. If you want to be a lawyer, maybe. But if you're going to be behind a reference desk most of the day, I don't think it's necessary. So look presentable, look professional, but appropriate to whatever job that you're going to be doing. Think about the background and the atmosphere, like noise for potential interruption. So, do you have a really messy room behind you that's going to distract me from the conversation that we're here to have, right? You don't want that. Do you have people walking past you? Do you have things that are avoid distractions is what I'm saying, right? And on that same level, if you live next to a fire station, um, that is not, you can't control the fire trucks having to go out on their calls, but you can control you taking your call from your house, which is right next to the fire station, and where you know that they're going to be going out on calls and you're going to hear the blaring sirens, right? So think about your background, think about the atmosphere where you're taking the call, and also understand that you can't always control it. When we got on this call today, I had asked Anne, can you hear that? And she said, hear what? And I said, oh, good, because here it started absolutely pouring, raining, and it's really, really loud where I'm at. And obviously, other than saying, some prayers and asking the Mother Nature to cool it, there's nothing I can do to so control what you can control to make it a good experience. But also don't be too hard on yourself if things don't always go to plan because life doesn't. So do send a follow-up and a thank you note. Do your best on an interview and give yourself grace if it didn't go how you would have liked. Things happen and no one's perfect and you don't have to be either. So do your best and be good with that, right? Um, Interview for jobs you aren't sure you're interested in. I think that this is also a really, really important tip is um, if someone reaches out to you for an opportunity, unless it's completely way off base, like they want to interview you for a social marketing manager role and um, they want to interview for that type of role, but you've only worked in libraries and you have no interest in talking to people on the internet and posting reels, maybe not, right? But if it's a role that's somewhat within your wheelhouse or your interests, I think there can be a lot that can be learned from that experience. And not only that is not everyone is stellar at describing the job um, just in a job description, right? And so going to that interview, you might learn, it might confirm things that you're for sure not interested in, but you might find out that the job is actually different than you thought that it was going to be just from reading about it. And if nothing else, it's good practice. So do take those opportunity for connection and to learn. Don't ghost anyone, just like, we hear about recruiters ghosting candidates all the time. Don't do the same. If you're not interested, be professional, but be clear about that. And I would also say don't give up, right? The job search can be hard, it can be grueling, and um, good things can happen just as quickly as bad things. You only need one yes. So keep going. Okay. Hiring manager perspective. And this is a you slide.
It can be me, but I think we were going to also talk about under the types of interviews. Stephanie was going to share about an asynchronous interview, and I had a
Mhm.
couple comments. I have to just say, from the hiring perspective, manager, we talked mostly about what back in the common interview questions. I'm looking for the fit, the ability to articulate, and those sorts of things. But I think it might be more useful for people to talk to for here about an asynchronous interview and maybe academic um, search panels, search committees, since we only have 3 minutes.
So
Yeah, and
super
I
quick.
didn't mean to rush you. And for those of you who need to log off at the time, totally fine, understand, won't take it personally. But we will continue to go through the couple slides that we do have left.
Okay.
Does everyone feel okay about that?
The recording for this session, the last session, and the slides will be up on our website soon. Okay, so asynchronous interviews, I'm not sure how common they are anymore, but I experienced this when I was moving from Hawaii to Minnesota. I had an interview with the University of Minnesota Foundation, and I had never heard of an asynchronous interview before, and it was a very strange experience. I was emailed a link, and then I logged into this website. And how it worked was you're talking to a screen, which made it a lot harder because you can't see another face or hear like verbal cues if it's a phone interview. You're just talking at a blank screen, and a question would pop up. I would be given a minute or so to think about it, and then I would be given some time to respond, and there was a time limit on how long my responses could be. And so that was also kind of nerve-wracking to try to figure out what was long enough so that it was a good answer without going over time because then the recording would just cut off. I was also given 3 chances to re-record, which in theory sounds like it's helpful and great, but it kind of wasn't because the whole time I was just thinking about what I could do better. And I didn't tell Kelsey and Ann this, but when I was interviewing, I was working at a public library, and I asked my boss if I could stay at the library to do this interview, and she said that was totally fine because I did live next to a fire station, and I had not great internet at home, but also like public library Wi-Fi isn't always the greatest. And so there was one question where I was on my third take and I was running out of time and I didn't get through everything that I wanted to say. And I said the F word, and it was recorded and I didn't have a chance to fix it. However, I did get 2 more interviews with the University of Minnesota Foundation. So did they see it? I don't know. I'll never know. But I did make it to the final round, and they went with somebody with more like fundraising and donor relations experience, which is totally fine. Um, but asynchronous interviews are out there and they are strange and they are uncomfortable because you don't realize how much you rely on like visual and verbal cues from your interview panel. So, something to be aware of. When I was looking, I did not find a lot of information about it on the internet.
Amazing. I did not know that is I love a good story. I love a good story in that.
Yes.
Dan, I was going to ask you, was it with you for your current job? Because you're with the U.
Oh, 2 takes.
Mm. Okay, so the U is not hopefully doing them. And oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that there are so many of you that have had to experience this.
Yeah.
Well,
Oof.
well, I can transition to participating in various academic library search panel, search committees, which are very different than what Stephanie described because I know there are several academic library people here, so they can chime in on their experience too. My experience is at the university, because I was on 2 different panels at the University of Minnesota libraries, and it's like it amazes me that anybody ever actually gets hired and is available to take a job at the university when they finally offer it, because it takes so long. We were interviewing for a position, a reference and instruction librarian, and we were interviewing some school library people. And one of them said, well, I've interviewed for jobs where they call me in my car on my way home from the interview and offer me the job. And we're like, yeah, that is not going to happen here. We hope to talk to you in 6 months. So it's very prescribed how things are done. And the time is ridiculous, but almost the one, I don't know if this was your experience, Dan, if you had to make a presentation to colleagues or potential colleagues, did you?
No, yeah, mine did not. There was a lot of time for questions in mine, but um, and I don't know. Yeah, mine went mine. Well, it took mine went surprisingly quick, and maybe because
Oh, good.
it's technically a temporary 1 year appointment, and maybe that sped things up. Um, but uh, um, but I think it varies a lot by different departments at the U because
Well, and I
um,
suppose it depends on whether it's academic faculty or whatever, because in each of these cases, people had to make a presentation on an assigned topic with an assigned amount of time. So, the advice I have for that is pay attention to your topic and practice and rehearse, because we had at least one person who acted like they'd never seen a database before. When your job is reference and instruction, you're going to be making these presentations all over. So it's an interesting prospect. One of those committees also had, this was another type of interview I was going to talk about, and that's a group interview where all the candidates are there at the same time. It really has the atmosphere of Hunger Games, I have to say, where the final candidates for this position all were there, all had to make a presentation, and all had to respond to questions from the audience. There were 50 people in the audience who all had a lot of questions. And so in that case, I think you need to work with the organizer to make sure that you're not always the last person to answer the question. Because by that time, it's like, okay, I agree with what they said. And you want to get your own particular viewpoint across. They don't do that anymore because it was so awkward for everybody, both the candidates and for those of us in the audience or on the search committee. So the other type I think is common in public libraries is a panel interview where you have different representatives either from the city or the county. I was interviewed by a panel and there was a representative from the police department on there, someone from human services, someone from public works, and also library people. And you really need to think about your answers in that case because I don't think the public works or the police department really understood how libraries operated. So you had to adjust your prepared answers basically for that. But those can be difficult, but require different preparation, I think. So may you never be in a group interview. It would be my hope for you. So those are my experience. I've been on both sides of those. No, I've never been in a group interview, but I've been on both sides of the panel and of the academic search. And really, we want to know as we wrap up here, are we on I wanted to say right, WRITE, because that's the title of the session. Are we on the right track here? We're going to send a survey out to everybody who registered. And certainly we hope those of you who have attended multiple sessions will really give us some interesting feedback. We do have a couple future sessions planned on January 15th at 10 a.m. Central Time. We're going to do a jobs outlook with the Department of Employment, Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, DEED, and their market experts, and also talk about some library adjacent jobs. And then we do have the employment law to be determined that date. But we also have some other ideas for possible sections. And Stephanie said, sorry to pick on you, Dan, but we might be picking on you in the future, Dan, because I think the changing lanes, the moving types of libraries into or out of management, or in Dan's case, moving from into a business analyst job, which is a library adjacent job in many ways. And we also want to know what else you want to see. So keep all those things in mind, watch for our emails, and we hope that this has all been useful for you. Sorry to go over.
That's okay. Okay, so just wrap up discussion. And we went over today because this has been our most engaged session yet, which I love. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
So before we sign off, does anyone have a real itch to share with us? Do you experience nerves before an interview? If so, how do you calm them? Or what aspect of an interview do you find most challenging? As always, questions, comments, concerns, jokes, success stories. We want to hear it all. I will tell you, I sometimes still get nervous for interviews. I've done thousands and I still sometimes get nervous. And so one of the things that I do is I'll do all of my preparation, and then 5 minutes before I go do my interview, I'll do something that I really love or feels like me. I'll turn on one of my favorite songs. I'll go pet my dog, like something that really feels good and authentic to me. So I can go into the interview with that mood of like, okay, things are good. I'm feeling calm. I've already done all of the prep and I'm going to show up as myself. And so that's one of the things that I do to help calm me down a little bit before an interview.
I had to step in and do that for someone at the public library I was at. She was doing an online interview and had never done one before and was like really like worked up about it and like the energy was just palpable. And I had to send her out of the room. She got in early. She was 15 minutes early, and I just had to say, "Hey, go take a walk, go to the bathroom or something. You need to bring it down." And she said, "Okay, okay." And then I think she did well. I don't remember if she got that job or not, but she came up after and said that she was sorry for being so frazzled.
Well, and I think we all have to remember that, you want to go in your most positive way. You rarely get the opportunity to talk relatively uninterrupted about yourself for an hour or whatever the scheduled time is. And you have to remember they already like you. They picked you out of the applicant pool. And so they're interested in what you have to say. So I sometimes think that can help us soothe our nerves about, oh, will they like me? Well, I know they like at least part of me that they've read about or talked to me on the phone about. So as a hiring manager, I really want things to be more of a conversation. I don't want to come across as the troll under the bridge or whatever. I want to have it be a friendly conversation so that you do have the opportunity to explain, your community connections, all those things that we're looking for and when we're trying to fill a position. But remember, you've already won step one. You're in an interview.
Yeah, they already chose you. So feel free to be yourself. Okay, 10 minutes over, not bad. But thank you all so much for the sessions that you've attended and participated, whether this is your first or your second or your third or your fourth. We're so glad that you're here, and particularly for this week, thank you so much for your thoughtful participation, your discussion. It definitely, I think, adds to it. And like I said, I want us all to be learning from each other rather than lecturing. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you have any questions, any feedback, any suggestions, please do send them to hr@metronet.lib.mn.us. And the slides and the recording will be up on the website shortly. As Stephanie said, we're going to be taking a break for everyone to enjoy their holiday, and we'll be back at it in January. But again, thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't say it enough.